Well, hey, growing up, there were two things that I was really passionate about, and that was sports and the weather, all right? Sports and the weather. I loved sports. I still love sports. And growing up, I was just fascinated by the weather. And I think a lot of reasons were because we grew up where we actually had some snow, and I love the snow, and then severe storms. I know it's been a crazy week, but it's just always fascinated me. And I was growing up during the time of Jim Cantore. Y'all know who Jim Cantore is? Jim Cantore with the Weather Channel, and he was getting big, and he would go places and would just go to these extreme weather places, and it just always blew my mind and fascinated me, and it drew me in, and I just fell in love with the weather. So I go to college, and I majored in business in undergrad, and I was getting close to graduating with my business degree, and I had an elective left, and I'm looking online for all the different electives that I could take, and I see one that was a meteorology class. And I realized that not only was it a meteorology class, which I love the weather, but you got to make a weather balloon as part of the class. And so I'm like, man, I'm there for it. And so I sign up, and I go the first day of class, and I get there, and then they give us the syllabus, all right? And here's what I didn't realize is that this was an upper level meteorology class. And so here I am, the business major, with a bunch of other meteorology students, and I am going to have to read all these books that they really shouldn't have let me sign up for the class because, I mean, come on, I didn't take the prerequisites beforehand. And so if I'm going to have a prayer at passing the class, let alone launch a weather balloon, I'm going to have to read a lot. I'm going to have to work really hard. I'm going to have to talk to some people, go to study hall, like really try to understand this high-level math, this high-level science that I hadn't taken so that I could have a prayer at passing the class, which I needed to graduate. So I was faced with a decision. How much did I want to make a weather balloon, right? How much did I want to study as I was getting close to the end of graduating? Like how much time and effort, other than just having fun and doing things with the other classes that I had to do for my major, like how much time did I want to put into this? Because it was going to cost me a lot of my time and effort to have a prayer at passing the class. And so I decided that I would drop it, and I did. I dropped the class, and it was the right decision. It was the right decision. Why do I tell you that? Because here's the thing. If I had known going into that class that it was going to be more than me learning how to become Jim Cantore and make a weather balloon, all right, I wouldn't have signed up for it, right? Because I didn't understand all that went into actually successfully passing the class. If I would have known what it would require of me, if I would have known the cost that it was going to take, I would never have signed up for the class. And I wonder if there's some of you here today, some of you watching online, that you've believed in Jesus and you don't realize that He's called you to pay a cost. Like, are there any of you here this morning? I just wonder that when it comes to Jesus, when it comes to faith, man, if you would have known what you were getting into beforehand, you may not have signed up to follow Him. I wonder if there's any of you who genuinely want to follow Jesus, but when push comes to shove, the more you learn about what following Him actually means for your life, you're like, man, I don't know. That should have come with a disclaimer when I signed up to follow Jesus. Maybe there's some of you that are still exploring Jesus, and maybe you haven't believed yet, and you're not sure about following Him. Man, wouldn't it be great if you knew what was required of you if you were going to sign up to follow Him before you sign up to follow? I think it would. As we continue in our series today, Are You Sure? I just want to ask you this question and answer this question today. Are you sure you want to follow Jesus? Are you sure you want to follow Jesus? And I ask this question because following Jesus is simple. He didn't make it confusing, but it is not easy. It's not easy because what Jesus calls His followers to do, what Jesus expects of His followers, it's not easy. The things that He expects, the things that He calls you to, it will cost you something. It will cost you something. And to actually be a follower of His, to actually be what He calls a disciple, you have to be willing to pay the cost. And so what I want to do today is I just want to answer that question, and I want to ask it, like, are you sure you want to follow Jesus? Are you sure you want to follow Jesus? I appreciate you saying yes, but you haven't read what we're going to read today yet, and so hold on, all right? Are you sure you want to follow Jesus? Because it's going to cost you. And if you're here and you haven't chosen to follow him yet, I want you to know what you're getting into. And if you say, yes, I'm sure I want to follow Jesus, by the end of this message, I hope you're able to really examine your life and answer the question, because maybe you think you're following him, and when we look at what we're going to read, it may reveal, not because Matt said it, but because Jesus said it, that you're not actually following him. We're going to be in Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14. And we're going to start in verse 25 here in just a second. To give us some context, Jesus is teaching and he's doing ministry in and around the Galilee, which is an area in the northern part of Israel. And he's making his way through towns and villages. And wherever Jesus goes, a crowd follows. Wherever Jesus goes, a crowd follows. Because there were rumors at that time about this man who was doing things that was out of the ordinary. He was doing these miracles, and rumors are circulating, and people are coming. And when they come, they see the miracles that Jesus is doing, and it doesn't matter where he goes. When he enters a town, people say, hey, that Jesus is here, and people flock to him. And Jesus, here's what's so important to remember. Jesus was open to anybody following him. And he's still open today to anybody following him. But once you choose to follow him, what he expects and what he calls you to, you could say is a little narrow. Jesus is wide open in his invitation. Anybody can follow him. But you don't get to define what following him looks like. And because you don't get to define it, he calls you to things that are going to cost you something, because it's not natural to do the things that Jesus calls you to. What's natural is to try and define what following him looks like. And so crowds of people are coming wherever Jesus goes. And a lot of times Jesus, because he's Jesus, he knew what was in people's hearts, so he would know when they were there, if they were there for the right reasons, and his goal was to get to the heart. Let me get to the heart of who you are that are here, because if you're just here for a show, if you're just here to think you can define what following me looks like, that's not what I'm here for. So are you sure you want to follow Jesus? Let's look at what Jesus said, because he asked that very question in his own way to the crowd that was there in this situation with him. Luke chapter 14, starting in verse 25, here's what we read. Now great crowds, right, we have a crowd, were traveling with him. So he turned and said to them, are you sure you want to follow me? If anyone, look what he says, verse 26, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Yeah. It's like, Jesus, that's not the way to win friends and influence people. It's like, Jesus, that's not the way to build a movement. What are you doing? You're trying to thin the crowd, to which Jesus would say, you better believe I'm trying to thin the crowd, because he wanted people that were all in, committed, and knew what they were getting into. And this is the first of 3 times in this passage that Jesus gives a condition to being his disciple, which is a Greek translation of the word that means learner or student or follower, okay? And he said, hey, you've got to hate your closest relationships, even your own life, if you're going to follow me. And you might say, well, hold on. That doesn't really square with what I thought Jesus was about. I thought Jesus was all about love. I thought Jesus was all about loving one another. And hey, isn't there a commandment, like one of the 10 commandments that talks about like honoring your father and mother? And aren't we supposed to love our parents? Like, is Jesus contradicting himself here? Does Jesus not care about our relationships? No. Of course Jesus cares. And of course we're to love one another. But we have to understand the context in first century Israel to understand what Jesus was saying here. What Jesus was saying, in this culture, you would use the word that we translate hate, and you wouldn't use it the way that we use it. The way that we use hate is the opposite of love. The way that they understood hate in the first century was that you would love something less than. All right? So what is Jesus saying? He's saying, hey, if you're going to follow me, you've got to love me more than anything or anyone else. You've got to love me more than your family. You've got to love me more than your kids, more than your spouse. You've got to love me so much to where your love for me looks like hate to outsiders looking in to your love for your family. Not because you don't love your family, but that you love me so much more. And so are you sure you want to follow Jesus? Because Jesus says if you're going to follow me, you have to be willing to love me like that. That's what he's saying. So are you sure that you're willing to love Jesus more than your family, more than anything else? And I don't know. I don't know if that's true for you. You might say, yeah, I want to follow Jesus, I'm sure. Ooh, I don't know if I can love Jesus more than my family. Man, I am loyal to my people. I am loyal to my family. I mean, that's good. It's good to love your family. But whenever your love for family is more than your love for Jesus, Jesus says, then you're not ready to follow me. That's what Jesus is saying. See, the thing about America is that, and the West, is we're able to say, oh yeah, I love Jesus and I'll follow him, but we've never had to actually be faced with the decision, most often, with whether we'll follow Jesus or love our family. But see, there's people in other parts of the world. There's people in the majority world outside of the West where when they become a follower of Jesus, their family literally disowns them. Their family says, you're dead to me. And they're faced with a decision. Wow, this is real. When they read Luke 14, they're not saying, well, that sounds foreign. That sounds crazy. Like, I got to love him more than my family? I mean, okay, how do I do that? No. There's people in other countries that they're like, oh, I know exactly what Jesus is talking about here. Because when I chose to follow Jesus and I got outside of the religion of my family said, hey, you are dead to us. We want nothing to do with you. And they're literally alone. So the question is, outside of that being your experience, do you love Jesus more than any other relationship that's close to you? Truly. Do you love him more? And if you want to know if you love him more, here's a question. When is the last time you sacrificed and inconvenienced, right, yourself or your family for him? When's the last time that you sacrificed or inconvenienced yourself or your family for the sake of him? I'm not saying you neglect your family or that you don't love your family. No. I'm just asking if we're trying to get to the heart of, are you sure you want to follow Jesus? And Jesus is saying, man, if you're going to follow me, you can't be my follower. You can't be my disciple unless you love me more. Then when's the last time your life showed that you were more committed to Jesus than your family? Specifically, when what your family wanted and Jesus want collide. When's the last time what your spouse or what your kids wanted collided with what Jesus taught and what Jesus wants? And who did you pick? Right? If you love him more, then you'll be willing to do that hard thing. Are you more committed to Jesus or your relationships? Are you more committed to Jesus or your kids' baseball team? I rag on baseball all the time because I'm living it, all right? I'm living baseball. I know I joke about that, all right? But are you more committed to Jesus and following him? Or making sure that you can make every family commitment, even if that means, well, I can't come to church for the next 2 months because, well, we're going on 10 vacations, and then for the next 3 months, we've got family reunions, and then over here, I've got all this. Jesus is like, come on now. Are you going to follow me and me be the priority or other things, right? See, Jesus is committed to people being sold out to following him. He doesn't just want casual fans. He wants committed followers. It's easy to be a fan. Can I be real? Last Sunday, there were a lot of y'all wearing Tennessee orange. There's a lot fewer of y'all wearing Tennessee orange today, all right? There's a couple of you that are still wearing it. Y'all are the real ones, all right? Win, lose, or draw, I'm going to wear that Tennessee orange, right? Come on. How often do we treat Jesus like we treat our favorite sports team? When we need him, we'll follow him. But when things are going good and it seems like we don't need him, we're good. We're out. When my team's winning, I'm wearing their gear. When they lose, I don't want to be seen in that, right? Jesus wants and desires committed people. He wants followers, not phony frauds. And listen, don't get mad at me, get mad at Jesus. All right, here we go. Now listen, if that didn't thin the crowd, what he said next sure would, all right? And the disciples, you can imagine like the 12 that are there and they follow with him everywhere. When he starts saying this, they're probably like, oh, Jesus, man, we're trying to build a movement. People are going to go. And he's like, yeah, I hope they do because I want the committed. I want people that are all in. And then he says this, whoever, verse 27, does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross. Now, this was provocative because when Jesus said this, those following him would have known exactly what he meant. Those who are not willing to carry an instrument of death. That's what he was saying. Because a cross in the first century was not something cute that you wore around your neck or you put as a tattoo on your arm. All right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm saying that's not what people thought of when they heard cross. What they heard was, whoa, whoa, whoa. Who will not bear his own cross? Man, that's for criminals. Criminals carry their own cross to a hill to be publicly executed. So what do you mean if we don't carry our own cross, then we cannot be your disciple? In essence, he's saying, if you aren't willing to die for me, if the time comes for it, then you cannot be my disciple. Again, that sounds extreme, and Jesus wanted it to sound extreme. If you aren't willing to die for me, if the time called for it, you cannot be my disciple. Do you love me enough, this is what Jesus is asking, that if your life was on the line and it was live and denounce me, or be willing to die because you say you are a follower of mine, what are you going to say? What are you going to do? And here's the thing. I think most of us say, oh, I would die with him. But we don't really know until we're in that situation, do we? Like, it sounds good, and man, I want to believe that I would. But man, I got kids. I got a wife. Man, surely Jesus would like show me some grace if I was thinking about them when I had a moment to choose whether or not I would denounce him publicly, even if it meant my death, because he wants me to take care of him, right? I mean, on one hand, yes. On the other hand, what did Jesus just say before this? Do you love him more than your family? Now that sounds extreme. I get it. That sounds extreme. That sounds like, man, Jesus is really looking for people that are sold out. And it's like, yes, he is. So how can you get to the place of saying, man, if the time came for it, I would be willing to die for you? It's to daily deny yourself. It's to deny yourself. The Apostle Paul wrote in the New Testament that I've been crucified with Christ, and it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives within me. And so if Christ lives within you as a follower of Jesus, then your goal is to increasingly allow Jesus to live out of you. All right? If Jesus lives within you as a follower of Jesus, then you want Jesus to ooze from you, that when people see you, they see more of Jesus than they see you. Well, how does that happen? That happens through denying yourself, not indulging yourself. And I mean, come on, we live in a culture of indulgence, don't we? We live in a culture that's all about self-gratification. It's not fun or popular to say, okay, I'm going to deny myself today. I'm going to go without for the sake of others and for the sake of honoring God. Like, we want that as an ideal, but when push comes to shove, so often, I mean, maybe I'm alone here, but so often, you know what I choose? I choose self-indulging. So let me ask you this. Are you willing to deny yourself for the sake of following Jesus? Let me ask you this. How do you react when things don't go your way? When's the last time what you wanted conflicted with what God wanted? When's the last time your plans conflicted with what ultimately happened? How did you react? How did that make you feel? Were you like, man, I'm so glad my plans didn't work out. I am all in for Jesus. Doubt it, right? And I'm not saying you need to be jolly about it, right? But Jesus used some pretty strong language here. He said, if you don't love me more than anyone else, you cannot be my disciple. And if you're not willing to deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. Cannot be my disciple. Like, those are strong words. Not, I guess you can. No, cannot and be my disciple. Interestingly, I want to point out something. Jesus doesn't say, if you're not willing to do these things, you cannot be a Christian. Isn't that interesting? He doesn't say you cannot be a Christian. He says you cannot be my disciple. That's interesting, right? Do you know in the New Testament, the word translated as Christian is only used 3 times? But the word translated as disciple or follower is in the New Testament over 200 times. Isn't that interesting? I don't know, that's just interesting, right? Might it be that Jesus is not solely concerned with you giving your life to him by saying, I believe. Oh, but I'm a Christian. What if Jesus is concerned with you, yes, giving your life to him and becoming a Christian, but not being satisfied with a new identity in name, I'm a Christian, but he desires for you to do something with your Christianness. He desires for you to go all in and be active, involved in what it is that he's calling you to. What if he expects people that say, man, I'm a Christian, it's like, well, there shouldn't be a variation between Christian and disciple, Christian and follower. If you've given your life to him, man, aren't you following him? Jesus is after disciples, followers. He's after people who are willing to say, I'm sure that I want to follow you. But before you say that, he wants you to know what you're in for. Because to follow him means you got to love him more than other relationships. To follow him, to be his disciple, it means you've got to be willing to deny yourself. And if Jesus wasn't being clear enough, he really leans in here and he wants people to know that they've got to count the cost. Like, if you're going to follow me, you've got to count what it's going to cost you, right? He wants to be up front, and he gives 2 examples of the cost if he hasn't been clear already, all right? Verse 28, listen to this. He says, for which of you, wanting to build a tower, doesn't first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, after he has laid the foundation and cannot finish it, all the onlookers will begin to ridicule him, saying, this man started to build and wasn't able to finish. Jesus is like, hey, have you ever seen a half-built house or a commercial building? It's like you drive by it and you're like, what were they doing? Were they not going to finish it? Well, clearly they didn't count the cost and they ran out of money. Jesus is saying, if you're going to follow me, don't be like a half-built house. Like, if you're going to sign up to follow me, man, understand what you're doing, understand what you're committing to, and go all in. And he goes on. He says, hey, what king going to war against another king will not first sit down and decide if he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If not, while the other is still far off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. He says, look, if you're going to war, you're calculated. And if you realize, wow, they got 20,000, I got 10,000, I'm going to lose. Like, I'm going to send terms of peace. And here's the thing. Building a building and war are big things. They aren't entered into hastily or quickly without counting the cost. That's Jesus' point. Hey, if you're going to follow me, understand what you're committing to. Because if you're saying I'm going to follow you, and then when push comes to shove, you realize the cost and then you bow out, what Jesus is saying is that, well, you shouldn't have followed me in the first place because that's what I'm about. What Jesus is saying is it's going to cost you something to follow me. And it's not that you have to have it all figured out from day one. Full surrender to Jesus and following him is a process. And here's another good thing to remember. Because following Jesus is a process and it is to exist your entire life, you can't make a decision once and then think, well, because I decided to follow Jesus, I'm good. No. Following Jesus is 1,000 daily decisions for the rest of your life. A Christian is one who says, oh man, I realize who Jesus is. He lived, he died, he rose again. I believe that I'm a sinner. I need to place my faith in Jesus. Yes, I've got assurance that when I die, I'm going to heaven. Yes. But Jesus didn't say you can't be a Christian. He says you can't be a disciple because a disciple, a follower of his, is something more than a Christian. Are you a Christian or are you a follower of Jesus? That's what Jesus is pressing in here for us, right? Then he goes on to clarify with just a couple more verses. And he says, in the same way, therefore, every one of you who does not, it's like, Jesus, you've done enough, right? No, he's going a little bit further to thin the crowd a little bit more. Every one of you who does not renounce all his possessions cannot be my disciple. And it's like, oh man, Jesus. So now we got to love you more than our family. We got to love you more than ourselves. And now we got to love you more than our stuff. Yes. Because Jesus knows what you know. That what oftentimes comes between your heart and God is the stuff that you accumulate. The stuff that we have, the possessions that we have. It's not that possessions are bad. It's not that having possessions are bad. It's that when possessions have you, that's bad. That when your possessions have taken control of you to where you're no longer the owner of your possessions, but your possessions are the owner of you. To where your whole life is committed to, well, I've got to serve my possessions and my stuff, and that may keep me from following Jesus. Jesus is like, no. If you're going to follow me, your possessions have to take second place. Your possessions have to take second place. Then Jesus closes with this, verse 34. Now salt, I love all these illustrations, it's great, right? Now salt is good, but if salt loses its taste, how will it be made salty? It isn't fit for the soil or for the manure pile. Man, they throw it out. Let anyone who has ears to hear, listen. Translation, Jesus is like, whoever's still in the crowd, if you want to hear what I'm saying and you've got ears to hear, hey, listen to what I'm saying. He's saying, you say you're a disciple. You say you want to follow me. But if you're not willing to follow me the way that I've just defined it, then you're like salt that's lost its taste. What good is it? Now, that's a, Jesus, bold, right? Because Jesus was after something, right? He wasn't after a big crowd. He wanted to make sure that whomever was in the crowd was committed. But he wasn't after a crowd of half-hearted followers. He was after a group of people committed to him. And you might say, well, what happened to just be a good person and come to church when I can make it and say a prayer and think about Jesus on Easter and Christmas? Like, what happened to that was that somebody made that normal because that's not Jesus. Like, that's not Jesus. Jesus is this. Like, we just read Jesus and what he said it means to be a follower of yours. But here's a question that you might be wondering. Why? You ever thought, like, why, Jesus? Like, why demand this type of loyalty and following? Well, it's because when you come to Jesus, he doesn't just become your Savior, he's to become your Lord. What that means is when you come to Jesus and you realize your need for him because you're a sinner, that you also realize, oh my goodness, he's not just my Savior, that means I have a ticket to heaven, but he is also the one that I want to follow for the rest of my life, because if he saved me from sin, he saved me from a life separated from him. If he saved my life from going in the direction that it was going in, I should want to honor him by how I live. Why does Jesus demand this type of loyalty and following? Because he knows something that you don't know. That you and I were created for this type of devotion. He knows that we were created. I mean, think about the opposite of what Jesus calls people to. Loving your family more than him. Loving your stuff more than him. Loving yourself more than him. Let me ask you a question. How many people that you know that have wrecked their life, at the root of it, what they were doing was loving themselves more than God? At the root of it, they were loving their other relationships more than God. At the root of it, they were a slave to their stuff and their possessions more than God. Like, why does Jesus demand this? Because he knows what you're created for. He knows what you need. He knows that the life that he's calling you to is what will bless you. Because he created you. Why does he call us to this? Because he knows that when you choose to follow him, the enemy of God, Satan, knows it, sees it, and targets you. Why does he call you to devotion? Because half-hearted devotion will not be able to stand up against the temptations and the schemes of the evil one. If you're not all in, sold out for Jesus, and being a disciple, a follower of his, then when temptation comes, you'll fall for it every time because you have no foundation, because foundation and strength in Jesus comes from committing to him, being all in. Why is it that Jesus demands this type of loyalty and following? Because he knew the mission for which he was calling his followers to. And the mission that the early disciples, the 12 that followed him for 3 years in his earthly ministry, he knew that he was calling them to a mission of taking the message of Jesus to the ends of the world. And he was calling those early Christians to a message that they would take the message of Jesus to the ends of the world, and he knew what awaited them. And he knew that what awaited them was persecution and potentially death. And if he would have just said, yeah, I want you to follow me if it's convenient for you. Hey, if you can fit me into your schedule, hey. He knew that that would not produce the type of disciples and followers that would change the world. But what does change the world? What changes the world is when people who knew Jesus and saw him and were convinced that he lived and died and rose again, what changes the world is when those people are willing to die, when the Roman Empire looks at them and says, hey, you need to renounce your faith or you're going to die. And they say, kill me because I cannot deny what I've seen and who I'm following, because Jesus is my leader in my life. He's my Lord. And that's what they did. And it changed the world. And you know how the world is still changed today? Isn't it interesting? The world is still changed today by people who are willing to follow Jesus. A lot of people have issues with Christians, and I get that. Because you know what a Christian is? A Christian is someone who, man, I've put my faith in Jesus for eternity, but I live like the devil. And people are like, man, you're a hypocrite. I don't see the congruence in your life. Why would I want to follow Jesus if following Jesus looks exactly like my life and Jesus hasn't changed your life? And I get their pushback. You know what changes the world? Are people who follow Jesus. People who follow Jesus. And they're like, man, I'm going to love Jesus more than anything else. And people look at that and they're like, okay, there's something different about you. Because if you're willing to follow Jesus that much, maybe there's something to him. So are you sure you want to follow Jesus? Are you sure that you want to follow this Jesus? Not the version of Jesus that maybe you've heard about or grew up with. But are you sure you want to follow this Jesus? Listen, I think if Jesus were in the flesh in the room standing right here and you said no and you walked out, I think he'd be like, I respect that. Just like I think he respected the people that walked away because he was like, well, I just told you what it was, and if you can't do it, okay, at least you're being honest. But I do believe if you say no to I don't want to follow this Jesus, I do believe you're missing out on what you were created for. And the greatest life that God desires for you, and joy and peace that you could never experience no matter how far you search for it anywhere else. And literally, Jesus is the one that you should be following. So for those of you that would say, okay, I do want to follow this Jesus, I'm sure I want to follow this Jesus, let me end with this. How can you have this type of commitment? Because here's the thing. I say this all the time around here. Following Jesus is simple, but it's not easy. He doesn't make it confusing, but it's not easy, okay? And Jesus is all about direction, not perfection. Okay, I say both of those things all the time. It's not about, okay, well, I have to perfectly follow Jesus now. No, this is not about guilt, all right? This is about, okay, if I want to follow this Jesus, but it seems difficult, how can I do that? How can I do that? Because it's not always easy. How can I do that? Number one, I'm going to give you three things. Number one, you've got to see Jesus as worth the cost. Seeing Jesus as worth the cost is actually the ultimate why and the how. Like, why should I follow Jesus? Because it's worth it, right? But how? Man, it's teaching yourself that he's worth the cost. It's reminding yourself that he is the greatest person that you could ever want to love. He's the greatest treasure of anything that you could ever possess, that he is what you were made for, so denying yourself for him is worth it. You realize that in following Jesus, nothing is ever really lost because in him you gain everything. So it's realizing that he's worth the cost. Number one. Number two, how can you have this type of commitment? Through prayer. Through prayer. Without prayer and trying to do something on your own strength, it will always feel hard. But through prayer, you can ask God to empower you to become this type of committed disciple or follower. And that may sound kind of crazy as it is. And you know why I think it might sound kind of crazy? Because for most Christians, what they pray for are sick people, not spiritual strength. For most Christians, what they pray for is for somebody to be healed physically, not for them to love Jesus more. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with praying for sick people. I do it a lot. But what would happen if this seems hard, but you said, no, I'm going to pray for strength because God can give me strength. Because think about this, if God desires for you to become something, don't you think if you prayed and asked him to help you that he would help you become what it is that he desires for you to become? So here's the thing, if you want to desire this, and you want to be this type of committed disciple or follower of Jesus, man, it can't happen apart from prayer. Prayer should be something that you run to God regularly on your own, but prayer is also something that we should collectively do together for each other. And this Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m., right here in this room, we're having a night of prayer and worship, all right? And here we go. Listen to me. If you should be here. You should be here. You should commit to being here, Not because I'm guilting you, but because, man, come on. If you desire to be a committed follower of Jesus and you can't truly be all in apart from prayer, getting together to where we can practice prayer together, that's what this night's about. It's about us practicing praying together so that when we're not together, we know how to pray and what to pray for when we're on our own. And so this Tuesday night, we're going to be practicing to pray. We're going to practice what it looks like to pray and to seek closeness to God. We're going to seek Him. We're going to look forward to Easter and prepare ourselves for Easter. But one of the big things we're going to do is to examine our hearts and just be real before God and say, God, I'm not what I used to be, but I'm not where I know you desire me. And so, God, in your grace, would you strengthen me? Would you reveal to me any areas of my life that are out of sort with you and being this type of follower? And we're going to pray and we're going to worship. And I promise you, just like there were dozens of people that came to the last one that we did 2 months ago and it changed their life, I promise you, if you come together and pray and you truly seek Him, it will make a difference in your life, especially if you desire to follow Jesus in this way. So, prayer, realize that He's worth the cost, and then finally, commit to immediate obedience. Commit to immediate obedience. Ugh, tongue twister there. Commit to immediate obedience. Listen to me. Obedience now leads to greater obedience later. Making the sacrificial decision now puts you on the path to greater sacrifice later. Activities reveal your heart, but they also direct your heart. When I choose to obey God in the moment, right now, of what it is that's before me, I'm more likely later to obey Him on the next thing that He calls me to. Why? Because obedience sends you in a direction. Obedience sends you in the direction of closeness to Jesus. And disobedience sends you in another direction. And so if you're saying, man, I want to be a disciple. I want to be this type of committed follower that Jesus laid out. Like, I want that for my life. How can you have it? Man, you got to see that He's worth the cost. That'll change your heart. You got to pray. That'll give you strength. And then anytime you hear something that you need to be doing, don't put it off. Don't make an excuse. Like, do it. Immediately obey. Not to earn anything from Him, but because obedience takes you down a path towards greater obedience, and it brings your heart closer to loving Him. Because Jesus said, if you love me, you'll obey me. And the inverse is also true. The more that you obey Him with the right heart, the more you will love Him. Because obedience takes you down that path. So if you're like, man, I want to be this type of disciple, I want to be this type of committed follower, then what is the next thing that Jesus is asking of you? Obey immediately. Like if you were to say to me, Matt, I want to be this type of committed disciple, I want to be this type of follower, but you're not baptized, okay? And baptism is the first step of obedience in following Jesus. Baptism is the test. Baptism is the test that says, okay, yeah, I want to follow you, Jesus. And then He's like, okay, go under the water for me. And then you're like, ooh, I don't want to get my hair wet. It's like, what? It's like if you say, man, I want to be a committed follower of Jesus, then the first thing that you know Jesus is calling you to do, just say, yes, that's me. You don't get baptized because some guy on a stage told you. You get baptized because you love Jesus and you want to follow Him, and it's the first thing He told you to do. If you want to be a follower, a committed follower of Jesus, a committed disciple of Jesus, and there's all these needs in the church for you to serve, and you just look by them, and you're like, I don't, somebody else. It's like, then you don't want to be a committed follower of Jesus, right? It's so interesting. At the beginning of this message, it was like, yes, yes, yes. And then at the end, it's like, ugh, right? Because it's tough. It's tough. But listen. I believe there may be some of you right now that you know what it is that you need to obey God in. I believe there may be some of you here right now who you know. And listen, this is a great time to be talking about this going into Easter, right? Like preparing ourselves to, man, God, I'm so grateful for your resurrection. Man, let's get our hearts right. Like, are there some of you, are there some of you that you've been putting something off that you need to obey him in? Whatever that thing is, don't put it off anymore. Don't put it off anymore. Don't put it off anymore. Look, none of us are perfect. This is not about guilt. This is not about anything other than, are you sure you want to follow Jesus and the Jesus that we just read about and what he calls us to? It's worth it. It's worth it. So we're getting ready to sing a song, just like we do each week. And during this song, there will be men and women up here at the front. And if you need to move out of your seat to pray with someone, to ask someone to pray for you, to make a decision, if you need to be baptized, if you're like, man, there's something spiritually going on in my life, or there's a sin issue that, man, I just need to be real about it, and I need to give it over to God and be committed to him, then, man, don't leave. Like, do something with it. Do something with it. Maybe you want to come up here and just kneel and pray and ask God to give you strength, because the commitment that he desires for you to have long term, it might be that you're here today because he wants you to start today, right now. So what is that? What is the immediate obedient step that God has for you if you want to be that type of disciple, that type of follower? Ask yourself that question and then respond during this next song. Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for the clarity with which you give. God, I pray that nothing I said took away from your words, and that what needs to stay with all of us right now would be exactly what you need to stay with all of us. And would we be a church full of people who are all in, who are committed. Thank you for strengthening us, for helping us, because we can't do it in our own strength. Help us now, God. Help us now. In Jesus' name, amen.